Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Will Greece be able to survive in financial markets? I think that's the key question. That's a more operational way of putting the question that has been the topic of this panel, which is Greece post-program viable? And I commend the organizers, I commend the Chamber for putting up that theme for our discussion. And I would like to answer that question from the perspective of the ESM as an institution that has been involved in the crisis experience across Europe, as an institution that has a large exposure to Greece, and we will be the partner of Greece in the long run, and as an institution that operates in financial markets. And when we look at that question and try to answer it from that perspective, we notice that 2 points that are key and that have already been made here at some time, which is first, what it takes to survive in financial markets is a track record of national ownership. And second, it takes manageable refinancing needs and reassurance for investors. These are two key conditions in order for also Greece post-program being viable. Now let me say something about national ownership and the success. National ownership is key for making programs work. That is what we have experienced all across Europe in those countries that went through programs, and we have heard the Irish experience, we have heard about Cyprus, and that counts for other countries as well. And it helps in creating a track record, in creating a story. And let me show you one slide on this. This is the track record that we see. The track record of the reforms over the last 8 years as they were put together in an indicator. And what we see is that program countries in Europe are among the reform champions in the euro area. And we see that what Greece had done over those 8 years is a big step. It's number one among those countries. So that's an important point to notice, and an important point, if you wish, to be proud of. At least it's important information also for investors. There are obviously caveats to that, and that we should also keep in mind. First, obviously, the reform needs in Greece were larger than in other countries. We have heard also this before. That's point number one. Point number two is that ownership and reforms is not always the same, and we know that the relationship in terms of the reforms and national ownership has been rather conflictual and tedious for some time. But we also note, and that is again what matters, that there has been now more of a track record, for example, in concluding reviews in time. And that is also what is important to acknowledge and what helps in creating a story for investment. There is obviously also the point, and then we go, that is important forward-looking, that what you see in this chart reflects partly legislative changes, but they have to be put in practice. Again, that requires ownership of institutions, of authorities at all levels, and this morning this has been addressed in various speeches. So there is more to be done. And this more to be done is the second part of what matters. So ownership has to be shown beyond the program in order to make it work. We have heard this morning already from Declan Costello, and it will be very helpful also for Greece, is that programs have stimulated growth post-program. If you look at Ireland, at Cyprus, that have record growth performance in the euro area, that is something that carries them forward. We also think that with ownership, Greece will be able to converge again and overcome the losses of the crisis. So that is good. But it needs, the policy commitment needs to stay. And here, this example of Portugal is indeed very instructive, because after the program, so to speak, for investors, the cards are given out again, and you need to convince them. And here the episode that happened with Portugal in late 2015, 2016 is instructive, because what happened, you had a new government coming into place markets were uncertain about the policy course that they would take. As a consequence of that, spreads started widening. They were facing difficult financing situations. What also added to this was that the rating that they had at that stage was very thin in terms of eligibility to the ECB. It was carried by one notch in one rating, by one rating agencies. So they had to really make an effort to convince, and that is what they managed. And it was when the better fiscal figures came in, when the rating upgrade happened, that actually then they became the biggest winner in the market in 2017, with yields falling substantially. So in this respect, indeed, the Portuguese example and what happened there is instructive. So far for the issue of ownership, national ownership, as a key condition, as a necessary condition in the program and beyond. Now, the second element of market access after assistance program is manageable refinancing needs and investors' trust in the liquidity of the country. And here, ESM financial support has helped a lot and helps a lot. One point is our low financing rates, and we have heard the numbers, that it is close to 1% for loans that are very long. That makes it very manageable. That actually gives a budgetary space to Greece, that if you compare it to a market financing rate, a hypothetical market financing rate of what Greece would pay and would have paid during the crisis, it amounts to 6% of GDP, more than 10 billion per year, and that's a considerable support and reassurance. The other point is that with our loan structure, we have managed to keep refinancing needs at a relatively low level of the years when countries exit the program, and that counts for Ireland and it counted for Portugal. For example, in the Portuguese case, amortization starts in 2025, so more than 10 years after the program. In Ireland, it starts in 2029. So there is a time period when actually the refinancing needs are kept low, and that makes it market access more manageable. In the case of Greece, actually, the average weighted maturity already out there is 32.5 years. This is extraordinary. And as you know, there is the commitment to work even further on that. A third element that helps market access is what has been called the cash buffer. So liquidity available for giving reassurance to investors that the country is able to pay. And this is a practical experience, again, that was reported to us from other DMOs, which is something that can take over investors. And it is part of the program design as we have created it throughout the crisis. Now, Greece is due to leave the ESM program in August, and the aim is to achieve sustainable and lasting growth. There are some steps still to be taken in this respect. So it is the full completion of the program as such, the prior actions that have to be done in order to come to the June decision. Then in June, the Eurogroup is set to discuss a number of policy issues. In order for that to be able also, the institutions are now working on the debt sustainability analysis, which is done by the institutions and not by the ESM alone, of course. But it's a common view that we have to create. In June, the decision then will be on the disbursement, the size of the disbursement, and that will also entail money in order to build up a cash buffer, in order to create the reassurance that I have talked of before. And it will, of course, also include a decision, or is set to include a decision on what debt measures to take in order to make debt sustainable, also make debt sustainable in the way I said before, in a way that you keep gross financing needs manageable, because investors look at those numbers from the perspective of their investment horizon. From that perspective, I think everything is set in order to try to achieve a sustainable and clean exit for Greece. Part of the decision, however, will also be whether we can set an incentive scheme for Greece in order to keep, indeed, the ownership of the reforms that were agreed beyond the program. Greece has already tested the markets and gone to the markets some time ago. That was successful. It doesn't mean full market access yet. So this is a process Greece has to continue to work on. The process will be not easier by the fact that, as we have heard before, there will be monetary policy normalization. The second point is where Greece somewhat differs from other countries is that the ECB still has to decide on its eligibility of Greek bonds for monetary policy operations, and obviously that will also affect markets. Therefore, it is even more important that Greece can have a convincing story to investors in order to come in and purchase their bonds. To wrap up, I think the lessons are clear. What it takes is a credible story, a credible track record of national ownership and manageable financing needs for an investor's trust in order for Greece and the Greek project to be viable after the program. I think the Greek authorities are working on this and the European partner are working on this, and I'm hopeful that this will all end up very good.